Skype is a classic at this point. I say that because they're the original. The industry of online communication has exploded, and Skype was the first big name associated with it. I don't think I'll ever separate the two in my mind. It even became part of our everyday language. You would say things like, Skype me about it, or I'll Skype you later tonight. Actually, when I think about that, I don't feel like you hear those as often anymore. Is that how people perceive them, that they're on their way out, or at least not anywhere near the level they once were? Because I want to touch on that in this video. Skype has had an interesting journey that I want to break up into 3 distinct stages. In the first stage, they were independent, growing from nothing to a multi-billion-dollar valued company. Second stage, they were owned by eBay, and in the third stage, they were owned by Microsoft. Third stage might be the most controversial. So today I want to talk about how they grew so large and where they stand today. But first, does anyone remember Kazaa? It was one of those decentralized peer-to-peer music file sharing websites very similar to Napster. They would connect people directly to each other rather than going through a centralized server. Simply put, they were all just ways for everyone to download music for free. Kazaa was created over in Europe by these 2 guys from Sweden and Denmark. Their names were not the easiest for me to say, but I'll give it a try. Freeze. Alright, Nicholas had a degree in business administration and engineering physics, and spent 3 years working for a Swedish telecommunications company. So, I'd say he had a good foundation for this, because that was launched toward the beginning of 2001, actually only 4 months before Napster was forced to shut down. If you can imagine, the copyright laws attached to these songs made operating these companies very difficult. It was constant legal battles. By the end of 2001, Kazaa was dealing with the same copyright issues. I imagine these two either didn't see much of a future for the company, or simply didn't want to deal with the non-stop legal battles. So by the end of that year, they sold Kazaa to an Australian company called Charmin Network. I know, I really took a turn there. I should be talking about Skype, and here I am talking about Kazaa. Well, here we go. The reason I've been talking about Kazaa is because right after they sold it, those 2 men went on to start Skype. And can I take a minute to point out the similarities between Kazaa and Skype? They both operate on this decentralized peer-to-peer model. In both cases, there's nothing between the users, it's just a direct connection. In one case, the users are sharing their music, and then in the other case, they're just sharing their voices. In fact, the last 2 letters of Skype are short for peer-to-peer. The PE part, it was originally referred to as Sky Peer-to-Peer, which was shortened to Skype. If it was my decision, I think I would have stuck with Skype, or it has a cool sound to it, but I suspect they saw value in having that catchy 1-syllable name. The actual service of Skype was first offered as a beta version in August of 2003 and was instantly a success. They had over 1 million registered users by the end of that year. It's because they had such a great business model that allowed them to grow. There were 3 main parts to it, I think that most would agree. The most important part was that it was free. Just think, for any small business, they would be almost guaranteed to attract some customers by giving away their product for free. The obvious issue with that is, you can't afford to give away too much of your product. But Skype didn't have to worry about that. The peer-to-peer nature of their service meant they didn't have to pay for servers or bandwidth or whatever you would expect them to have to pay for. So unlike most businesses, they were able to serve additional users without adding additional costs, which helped them build a strong user base. To go along with that, word-of-mouth advertising, it can be so effective, and this was a perfect service for it because it required 2 people to use it. Just an example, if you were going to call me later, maybe I'll recommend you download Skype and we could talk that way because it'll save us some money. That's it, right there. There's a new Skype user and then maybe they'll tell someone else about it. Meanwhile, Skype is getting all this advertising for free. Also, for the third part, they did have some costs. They were a business after all, but they even had an alternative way to cover those. They would pay for them by selling portions of the company to private investors. Now the new question is, why would that private investor be interested? What would the payoff be for them? They invested with the promise that Skype would add paid services eventually and start collecting some money. The idea that the money's not here now, but it will be here soon. So, to summarize all of that, for almost a year, Skype collected no revenue, but was able to build their user base to millions of people. Once they were established, in July of 2004, they finally launched their paid service. It was called Skype Out, and it would allow customers to call people that weren't on Skype. Less than a year later, they launched the opposite service called Skype In that allowed customers to receive calls from people that weren't on Skype. They still weren't profitable, but now they were bringing in millions of dollars in sales. And that's better. Those sales, along with their rapidly growing user base, attracted the attention of eBay, which leads us to our second stage. In 2005, Skype was acquired by eBay for $2.6 billion, half of it in cash, and the other half was in eBay stock, which I have to admit sounds a little pricey for a 2-year-old company with sales of around $60 million that wasn't even turning a profit. $2.6 billion? That's hard to justify. But as I said, they were growing fast, so they must have figured it was worth the premium. Also, they felt confident that they'd be able to integrate it into their online auctions, sort of opening communications between the buyers and the sellers and hopefully making the process run a little smoother. PayPal is the other company that comes to mind. eBay bought them a few years earlier with similar intentions of integrating it into their auctions and making the way they envisioned. Here, when you buy something on eBay, do you really want to talk to, or for heaven's sake, video chat with the person who sold it to you? Why would you really? Just talk through emails and that's enough. Those emails proved to be the preferred method for eBay communications, so Skype didn't turn out to be especially valuable for their service. Then, in 2009, 4 years later, eBay sold about 70% of Skype to a private investment firm called Silver Lake Partners for the price of $1.9 billion, which did value the company at around $2.75 billion, which is similar to what they bought it for. So, yeah, a similar price, but it is after 4 years of growth. So I'm gonna go ahead and say that they did overpay when they bought it. Discussing overpaying is a good segue into their third stage, because in 2011, Microsoft acquired 100% of Skype for $8.56 billion in cash. This valued Skype at over 3 times higher than the deal 2 years earlier. It was actually Microsoft's largest acquisition until they bought LinkedIn in 2016. When this deal happened, many people believed that Microsoft had seriously overpaid, and from a financial standpoint, it's hard to argue. The year before, Skype had $860 million in revenue, but it resulted in an $8 million loss. Skype was not profitable. From the beginning, they were good at generating business, but they always struggled to turn a profit. This led to almost $700 million in debt, making everyone question why Microsoft saw such value in Skype. At the time of the sale, Skype's CEO, who was then in charge of that division under Microsoft, said, "Together, we will be able to accelerate Skype's goal to reach 1 billion users daily." That was a far-off goal because they were currently at about 65 million monthly users. This makes me think that the premium was based on expected growth from the free service, which could potentially translate to more paying customers, which was somewhere between 8 and 9 million per month at the time. Another reason for the acquisition was to complement Windows Live Messenger, formerly called MSN Messenger. In 2011, it actually had far more active monthly users than Skype, somewhere around 300 million. Soon after the acquisition, Microsoft enabled users of both services to communicate with each other. 2 years later, they discontinued Windows Live Messenger and migrated those users to Skype. They did something similar with Lync, a service specialized for business use. Microsoft integrated the two and rebranded Lync as Skype for Business in 2015. Now, Skype for Business is being replaced by Microsoft Teams, which is another story. There was also potential for Skype's integration with Windows Phone 7. Earlier that year, Microsoft announced that Nokia phones would primarily use it, and 2 years later, they acquired Nokia. Although it was considered disastrous, integrating Skype into those phones could have been a good utilization. Many believe that Microsoft bought Skype for its potential, partially as a defensive move. Google, Facebook, Cisco were all thought to be considering it, so Microsoft came in and took it for themselves before any of them had a chance. When it comes down to it, the purchase was a bit of a gamble, but they had some unique uses for it and some high expectations when it came to growing their user base. I don't have a perfect answer as to whether or not it was a smart decision by Microsoft or eBay for that matter. I can say that they did both help grow the Skype name, but maybe not enough. I can see how some would consider this a failure. Think back. Throughout their existence, all 3 stages, there were high hopes for Skype. People were buying into this company for far more than it was worth at the time, because they always saw future potential. In the beginning it was these private investors, then it was eBay, then it was Microsoft. Every one of them were criticized for paying too much at the time. And in reality, I don't think it ever has met that sky-high potential. The current estimates have them at about 300 million monthly users, which is still nowhere near that optimistic goal of 1 billion per day set years ago. And quite honestly, I can't even imagine them ever reaching that mark. I think the real issue with Skype today is they're missing out on market share. Like I said in the beginning, online communication services have been exploding. Skype was the original. They had a tight hold on that market for years, but not as much today. As the market grows and more users enter it, they're missing out on potential customers more often than not. Whichever service you use is probably dependent on what you're using it for. There's so many of them. WhatsApp from Facebook is ridiculously popular. They also have the Messenger app. There's Viber, Slack, Duo, Discord. Even Apple's FaceTime app or their iMessages can be considered competitors. Now, instead of one real choice, there's 50 of them. So it's not that Skype... The story of Skype doesn't end with its acquisition by Microsoft. In fact, it continues to evolve in interesting ways. Despite the criticisms and setbacks, Skype has managed to maintain a significant user base, though not as monumental as once projected. One of the most notable aspects of Skype's evolution has been its integration with other Microsoft services. For instance, Skype is now integrated into the Office suite, allowing for seamless communication and collaboration across platforms. This has made it a valuable tool for business users who rely on Office 365 for their daily operations. But what about the future? Where does Skype go from here? Microsoft seems to be focusing more on Microsoft Teams for business communication, which raises questions about Skype's role moving forward. However, Skype still has a unique position in the market, especially for personal use and international communication. There have been rumors and speculations about potential new features and integrations that could breathe new life into Skype. Imagine a world where Skype leverages emerging technologies like artificial intelligence for real-time translation or augmented reality for more immersive communication experiences. These innovations could help Skype regain some of its lost ground and appeal to a new generation of users. Moreover, Microsoft has the resources and expertise to pivot and adapt Skype to meet the changing needs of the market. Whether it's through new features, better user experience, or strategic partnerships, there's potential for Skype to reinvent itself once again. In conclusion, while Skype may not be the market leader it once was, it's far from irrelevant. Its journey has been marked by highs and lows, but its story is still being written. As technology continues to advance and user needs evolve, there's always a possibility for a resurgence, so keep an eye on Skype. Its next chapter could be just around the corner. While Skype's journey with Microsoft has seen its fair share of innovations and integrations, it hasn't been without controversy. Many longtime users have expressed frustration over the constant changes in the interface, often feeling that these alterations seem unnecessary and confusing. The forced transition to creating Microsoft accounts has been another sore point, adding layers of complexity to a service that was once straightforward and user-friendly. Moreover, the shift from Skype's original peer-to-peer system to centralized servers under Microsoft's control has not only altered performance but also raised significant privacy concerns. Soon after the switch, there were scandals involving the interception of user data, leading to a growing mistrust among users. These issues have contributed to a perception that Skype has become more complex yet less reliable, a far cry from the pioneering service that once led the market. The rebranding and mergers with other Microsoft services have only added to the confusion, making it harder for users to navigate and trust the platform. So, what do you think about Skype today? Do you see it rising back to the top of its industry, or do you think its best days are behind it? Let us know in the comments below. Are you still a Skype user, or have you moved on to other platforms? Share your experiences and thoughts on what Skype needs to do to regain its former glory. Thank you for watching.